I was planning on taking a look at Greg Locke's most recent sermon. This one was on abortion, and he's basically celebrating and talking about what his next steps and hopes and dreams are. If you haven't seen the other parts, don't worry about it. This is independent of the rest. You don't have to see 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 to understand what's happening here. I don't know if you guys have heard this term before. There's something called a pantheon, right? A pantheon is a group of gods. And there's a Greek pantheon and a Roman pantheon and just a bunch of different pantheons. The planets like Venus, Neptune, Mercury, so on and so forth, they are named after the pantheon of different groups, like the Greek pantheon and the Roman pantheon. Neptune is from the Roman pantheon. Mercury is also from the Roman pantheon. Jupiter is the Roman equivalent of the Greek god Zeus. So the planets are named for like different pantheons, right? Zeus and Hades and Jupiter and Neptune, they were all gods of these different belief systems. Well, the Canaanites were a group of people who lived in the same area around the same time as the ancient Jews from the Old Testament. The Canaanites, they, like I said, they were in the same area as the Jews, and they had a pantheon too. The Canaanites did. You know who was part of their pantheon? Let me just pull up a list of the Canaanite pantheon, and I'm just going to throw some names. You tell me if any of these gods from the Canaanite pantheon sound familiar. Elohim, Yahweh, Baal, Moloch. I'll just go from the top now. Aglabol, Anat, Arse, Arsu, Ashtar Chemosh, Ashtar Chemosh, Asherah, queen consort of El. In the Canaanite pantheon, the god El created all of the other gods, and all of the other gods were known as the Elohim. As a group, they were known as the Elohim. Yahweh was one of the gods too. He was the god of metallurgy. So Moloch was a putative god of fire, husband of Eshat, maybe identified with Milcom. The Jews come along, and they are obviously heavily influenced by the Canaanite pantheon. They make a deal with their main man, Yahweh. They agree that this one God is going to protect them and they're going to be his kids or whatever. Of course, he's the god of metallurgy, as I mentioned earlier. And they're not going to worship any of the others. They're not going to worship Baal or Moloch or any of the other gods like the Canaanites do. They worship all of the others too, like all in tandem. But I guess Yahweh got jealous and wanted all of their attention. He wanted the attention of the Jews, and he didn't want them to give it to anybody else, basically. So that is the Canaanite pantheon, and why the Abrahamic religions are so completely ridiculous at their face. But I digress. Okay, so tell us about Moloch, or Molech, Greg Locke. Tell us how you think that people are secretly worshiping Molech.
One of the doctrines of demons and the seduction of spirituality that has transpired in the last 50 years has been the idea that even amongst Christians, that abortion is nothing more than health care and it's a woman's right. Did you know at least 4 times that I can find in my study of the Word of God in the Old Testament, God explicitly said to the nation of Israel, which, by the way, 1 Corinthians 10 says that Israel, everything good and bad happened to them as examples to how we're supposed to live out today in New Testament Christianity. He said at least 4 times that I can find. There may be more. You can find them and let me know. Where God said to Israel, do not, say do not. That's a command, not a suggestion. Do not let your children pass through the fire of Moloch.
Okay. Don't let your children pass through the fire of Molech. That means don't let your children be sacrificed to Satan. Is that right? Am I correct on that? Molech is another god. See, in the Bible, Yahweh was really, really concerned with people worshiping other gods from the pantheon. Yahweh was like super jealous and worried that, you know, he's going to turn around or he's going to walk into a room and see them in bed with another god or something. It was like one of Yahweh's deepest fears. So he constantly talks about them worshiping Molech and all of these other gods. Like, don't even talk to them. Don't even think about them. If you text them, all text should go through me, according to Yahweh. All text should go through Yahweh. If you're trying to communicate with Molech, if you need to hand the kids off, Yahweh will be the one to do it. He doesn't want you seeing Yahweh or he doesn't want you seeing Molech or thinking about Molech or any of that. Basically, that's the whole viewpoint. And that's why the Bible talks about, people worshiping Molech and stuff like that. So Greg Locke is picking up on Yahweh's jealousy over Molech and how much people loved this guy. And he's saying that people are going to be worshiping Molech in the end days. So let's keep listening and see what he has to say about this Canaanite god Molech.
That's a command, not a suggestion. Do not let your children pass through the fire of Moloch. This great big stone god that they would worship that had pendulum arms. And when the weight of that little baby would be placed into the stone hands of the god Molech, he would literally begin to bend over from the elbow and drop those babies into the fire. And they learned that from the abominations of the other nations that God said you should have no part of.
The abominations of the other nations you should have no part of. They're talking about the Canaanites. The Jews were not supposed to have anything to do with the Canaanites or their pantheon or whatever else. That's the whole thing here. I don't know what he's talking about when he says they, put their babies in this god's hands or whatever else. This is just nonsense, but okay.
And all these years later, we don't call it pass through the fire. We call it Planned Parenthood. Go, go, go! We call it, if you will, a women's health care choice.
Oh, so he's saying, wow, he is brainwashed. He's saying that Planned Parenthood, when you get an abortion, you are sacrificing your child to the god Molech. That's what he's saying. That's what he believes. That is delusional on new levels, dude. New levels. What brought you to that conclusion, Locke? How did you come to the conclusion that having an abortion, a medical procedure, is actually a sacrifice to a foreign god?
And yet, the church in America has been deceived by seducing spirits to believe that what we just saw this past Friday is, just really no big deal.
What happened this last Friday? I'm trying to think. So I believe this video came out on the 26th of June. So it was 1 week ago from tomorrow. 1 week ago tomorrow. What happened 1 week ago? No big deal? Oh, Roe v. Wade being struck down. Okay. I was trying to figure out, I thought it was a bad thing that he was referring to, not a good thing. Okay, that makes more sense. I guess what he's talking about is Roe v. Wade being struck down.
All this past Friday is, just really no big deal. You don't believe me? I got a little list here. It is by far from exhaustive. I just compiled it this morning over a cup of coffee, and it was some good coffee. Now, I hope some of these people prove me wrong today in their services. I wouldn't bank on it, because cowards are cowards no matter where they live and no matter how big their church is. And not all of these are pastors. These are just some of the biggest influencers, but many of them have the largest churches in America. And you would think after 50 years of fighting the slaughter of 65 million babies,
it's a delusional world you live in, if this is how you view it, honestly.
That these people would step up to the bat and hit a grand slam for Jesus and say, wow, thank God enough really has been enough. At least say something about it. Now, I will be fair.
Why say something about it? Why bother even mentioning it? It's done. What's done is done. Who cares? Why do you have to gloat over something that's already done? I really don't understand this mindset at all, this viewpoint. He thinks it's evil of these people and makes them false preachers, basically, that they're not gloating over Roe v. Wade being overturned. Is that what I'm picking up? I mean, that's what I'm picking up. Is that what he's putting down?
Enough to say there's some people that I wouldn't follow, that I wouldn't have preach here, and that I wouldn't preach for, that did say something shockingly to my amazement, and I'm glad of it. But I am shocked at how many of these celebrity individuals on my list didn't even blow their nose in the direction of the abortion fight. Oh, they had plenty to say when BLM was rioting in the streets about how racist and full of white supremacy America is.
Oh, okay. So he's talking about like pastors who sided against him in the culture war stuff, I guess, right? Am I reading this right? I think what he's saying is he's talking about pastors who support human rights or pastors who don't hate anybody for anything, you know, kind of like Jesus didn't hate anybody for anything, that kind of thing. Is that who he's talking about? That's the impression I'm getting. And they didn't say anything about Roe v. Wade being overturned. Greg, maybe that's because maybe they aren't happy about Roe v. Wade being overturned because the Bible is specifically in favor of abortion. Like, encourages people to get it. I don't know where this guy got the idea that the Bible is pro-life, but it's simply not.
Well, they had plenty to say about those things, right? Oh, they got plenty to say about trans rights, right? By the way, I believe in trans. I believe in transformation by the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. That's the truth.
Okay, that has nothing to do with trans rights, but here we are. Trans rights are human rights. If you are taking rights away from people and making them less equal than others, we don't live in an equal society. That's just how it is. And currently, right now, we don't. We don't live in an equal society. Now, if you want to live in an equal society, as the framers of the Constitution wanted, you're going to have to respect trans rights. But we can clearly see, not just based on what Locke has said in this sermon, but what he harps on constantly, he has no interest in human rights. He has no interest in protecting people's privacy or their rights or anything else.
Trans, I believe in. Gospel transformation. They had plenty to say about that. They got plenty to say about the injustices of the world. And most all of them want to talk about all of the shenanigans that are happening in Ukraine.
Okay, is he like in favor of the Ukraine war or something?
Ukraine is a smokescreen for sleepy Joe Biden 1,000%. And if you believe that Ukraine oppression nonsense, you ought to read a Bible for 5 minutes in your life.
Wow. I guess he is in favor of like Russia or whatever else. I mean, technically he hasn't said that he's in favor of Russia. So far he's just said that he doesn't think that Ukraine is oppressed, which is an inherently pro-Russia position because you're carrying water for them, you're furthering their propaganda. But, you know, I get, like I said, technically, logically, if I'm going to be logically consistent, he didn't actually come out as pro-Russia. This is a technically neutral position. But in a situation like this, in my opinion, it's not actually neutral.
But nonetheless, that's a whole nother message. Just thought I'd set the pace. I'm telling you, the church has been seduced. No peep of it. Now, I'm not even going to deal with things like K-Love.
K-Love, if you're unfamiliar, I believe that's a radio station. Progress Only. I wish he was here because he knows more about K-Love than I do. But K-Love is like this radio station that's really, really big. This Christian radio station. Super famous and influential and complete nutcases, all of them.
Never said a word about it. Well, we don't like to be controversial. No, you just like to be compromisers. That's what your problem is. I'd rather be called a controversial pastor than a compromising pastor.
Yeah, I don't know why he thinks that the Bible is pro-life. It's not.
Day of the week. And so if I burst your bubble and I hurt your feelings over your little friends, I didn't ask your permission before I wrote it down this morning.
It's perfectly logically and biblically consistent to be pro-choice. Perfectly consistent with the Bible.
Air One said nothing about it. I don't even know if Moody Radio said anything about it. Moody ain't nothing like it was when Moody was around. Moody would roll over in his grave at the compromise and leftism that's coming out of Chicago right now. But nonetheless, some of these you're going to...
But nonetheless, what does that mean in this context? I don't understand what he's trying to... Nonetheless? What do you mean nonetheless? But nonetheless what?
Anticipate and expect. I ain't going to take a long time here, but I'm just going to show you that the church has been duped by doctrines of demons. Some of the biggest churches, biggest influencers on the planet said not one peep about Roe v. Wade. T.D. Jakes. That's not surprising. He's corrupt to the core on a lot of fronts.
If you don't know T.D. Jakes, this guy is an self-described evangelical pastor, I believe, but he's one of the good ones, one of the few good ones. Evangelicalism has been taken over by extremism at this point. There was a point in time when Jimmy Carter called himself an evangelical. In fact, he probably still would. But evangelical now is synonymous with extremism. T.D. Jakes is trying to take it back. It's not going to work. This is T.D. Jakes on screen right here. Listen to what he had to say about the U.S. being a Christian nation. Again, self-described evangelical.
The church bought into the myth that this was a Christian nation. And once you get past that, which a lot of people are going to criticize me because they're still going to think it's a Christian nation, which is a whole different show. But once you begin to understand that democracy and that a republic actually is designed to be an overarching system to protect our unique nuances, then we no longer look for public policy to reflect biblical ethics. If we can divide, or what you would call separation of church and state, then we can dwell together more effectively. Because atheists, agnostics, Jews, all types of people, Muslims pay into the government then cannot reflect one particular view over another just because we are the dominant group of religious people in the country, because those numbers are changing every day. We need a neutralized government that protects our right to disagree with one another and agree with one another.
So that's T.D. Jakes, self-described evangelical. And obviously, that's why Greg Locke hates him. Because he's giving evangelicals a bad name in Greg Locke's eyes. Of course, he's trying to rehabilitate evangelicalism. And that's not going to work. It's not happening. Evangelicalism is inherently an extremist position, an extremist group at this point. There is no rehabilitating it. So I respect T.D. Jakes deeply. And I respect his desire to rehabilitate it. It's not happening, man. Not happening. Evangelicalism is off the rails now. There's no saving it.
One peep about Roe v. Wade. T.D. Jakes. That's not surprising. He's corrupt to the core on a lot of fronts.
He's not corrupt. He has different views than you. Corruption is not the same as having different views. This blows my mind, dude.
And I told you that before. Stephen Furtick.
Stephen Furtick, Kenneth Copeland left the TV network that he was on a while back, and Stephen Furtick took over his TV show. So Stephen Furtick is like Kenneth Copeland's replacement, and he tries to be a young, hip, cool kid that appeals to all the other young, hip, cool kids, basically. He's also an evangelical extremist. He's not a good person.
Huh? Oh, skinny jean, bicep preacher, right? I don't care what you think about Stephen Furtick. He's a coward. It's one of the reasons we're starting to write worship songs. I'm sick of all these worship songs we got to sing by these bunch of compromisers that won't stand up for the truth of God's word. Because let me tell you something. Hillsong didn't say nothing about it, neither. Not a one of them, and they got about 100 campuses.
Hillsong Church is the old church that Chris Pratt went to. He kind of made that church famous. Chris Pratt did, or even more famous than it was before. They got in a whole bunch of trouble recently for some sexual scandals, I believe. The leader of Hillsong got in a bunch of trouble recently. But that's beside the point. Greg Locke obviously hates Hillsong Church.
You say nether ain't a word. It is what I'm preaching.
That was obviously a mistake. He didn't mean to say it, but yeah, okay.
Ron Carpenter said nothing. Judah Smith said Jack Spratt. It was getting quiet up in the house. We're going to thin the ranks out today. Beth Moore ain't said a word.
Why do they need to? I don't understand. Why does anybody need to say a word about, like, what happened with Roe v. Wade? Why does anybody have to say anything? You succeeded. You got it removed from law. Great. Now move on. Why do they have to gloat about it? Why is that a requirement if you are to be considered a good preacher in Greg Locke's eyes? I don't understand.
Beth Moore ain't said a word.
What was that? Did he just, like... Let's just step back and listen to that again. What was that?
Beth Moore ain't said...
Why? Why, Greg? Why do you do these things? Do you sit at home and think to yourself, what weird things can I do to creep everybody out? What strange sayings can I use today? Let's see. And he's sitting there. I said this recently. Sitting there tapping his pencil like Eminem on a bus trying to write rhymes. You guys remember that from 8 Mile? Sitting there trying to figure out what he can say. He's less popular than a ham sandwich in a synagogue. Skinny jeans, fog machines, and there was another thing that he calls out constantly. This dude is something else.
Beth Moore ain't said a word. All this nonsense she's been told about women's rights. She don't believe in women's rights. She believes in selling books to the Southern Baptist Convention is what she believes in. She's a compromiser that left the faith anyhow, by the way. Did you know she goes to an Anglican church now? Anglican is so far from New Testament Christianity, it's ridiculous.
Now, Anglican is heavily influenced by Catholicism, isn't it? If I remember correctly. They're very similar to each other. Except, isn't Anglicanism more moderate than Catholicism? That means she technically didn't leave the faith. You're incorrect, Greg. She didn't. She actually stayed in the faith. She just believes that you're a nutcase. That's all. You being a nutcase, or people believing that you're a nutcase, has nothing to do with their belief in God. They can believe that you're a nutcase and simultaneously also be religious.
I ain't even got to the second text yet. Some of y'all are so upset. Andy Stanley. Stop reading his books on leadership. He shouldn't lead an outhouse.
So I don't know some of these people, but they're obviously very influential among a lot of evangelicals and stuff, so take that for what you will.
Joel Osteen.
Ooh, Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen is historically very moderate, although still holds all the same views. He just doesn't harp on them constantly. For example, he's anti-LGBT. If you're unfamiliar with Joel Osteen, he's a televangelist, a famous televangelist. He's more of a self-help guru type of person. And like I said, he does hold a lot of these same views, like anti-LGBT and all that stuff, but he doesn't talk about it constantly. What he does talk about constantly is prosperity gospel, telling people if you send him money, God will love you more. If you send Joel Osteen money, God will make sure it's a seed. God will make sure that you get what you need. Send in your mortgage money, God will cancel your mortgage debt, that kind of thing. That's Joel Osteen's whole bit. A few years ago, Joel Osteen lost like $10,000 or $100,000. I don't remember exactly how much it was. It was stolen from the church, like from the safe. And like 20-something people had access to the safe. Like they had the combination or the keys or whatever. So the cops investigated. They looked into it, but they couldn't ever pin it on any one person. They had no idea who did it, who stole all this money. Well, just recently, like last year, I think, a plumber was working on the churches, like the mega churches' walls in their bathroom, and I don't know, just some massive amount of money, like $10,000 fell out of the wall of the church. So whoever stole this money from the church's safe apparently decided to store the money in the walls of the church. Everybody suspected it was Joel Osteen himself who stole it, but couldn't pin it on him. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, you knew that one was coming. Good grief. Joel Osteen wouldn't rebuke his dog if it barked at him.
Like I said, Osteen focuses more on how much money can I get out of you rather than I don't like gay people. He's okay with gay people if they're willing to give him money. That's what it's all about for him.
Rick Warren, nothing. Largest church on the planet, nothing. Nothing. Judd Wilhite, Vegas.
You know, maybe they haven't gotten around to it. Roe v. Wade had just been overturned 2 days before this came out. You know, maybe they were waiting. Maybe they wanted to see how things played out or whatever. Like, there are a billion different options. I don't understand. Is this just Greg Locke looking for an opportunity to attack and harass other televangelists? That's what it seems like to me.
You might recognize that name because he's all over K-Love with Levi Lesko. Not a peep. Nada. Rich Wilkerson Jr. He's one of these cute guys on Twitter. Likes to show all of his chest hair while he's preaching.
Okay, now I have to see this. Who was it?
Likes to show all of his chest.
Hold on.
Rich Wilkerson Jr.
Rich Wilkerson Jr. Let's look this guy up. Images. This is the guy right here, apparently. This is him. Rich Wilkerson Jr. loves to show all his chest hair while he's preaching. See if I can find a video from him. Wait, is he from Hillsong? I think he's from Hillsong. Okay, here's a sermon.
How does all this stuff work? Where do you guys get your doctrine from? Well, let me tell you, we don't get our doctrine from leadership books. We don't determine our beliefs from self-help books, but rather all of our doctrine comes from God's book, that we study what God has said. This book becomes our truth. This is big. Let me offend you for a moment. Because we live in 2020. And the coolest thing to say in 2020 is, hey, bro, live your truth, man. Be you, live your truth. And I appreciate the sentiment, which means to live authentic and to live honest. But you have to understand that if you've encountered Jesus, if you've become a new creation, it is no longer you living your truth, but now it is you saying, God, I want your truth in my life. I need God's truth over my truth. Do not.
Yeah, it sounds like a message of extremism, and I'm not seeing any chest hairs in that or in this one, this next one here.
Seasons where there's gaps. And we say, I don't feel favored. And because we don't feel favored, we curse the season we're in instead of calling upon the Spirit who can change something. It's like a farmer doesn't plant seed and then curse the winter. A farmer understands that the winter has a purpose for the seed to grow. I don't want our church to curse the season we're in. I want our church to call upon the Spirit. Let me tell you what.
Yeah, I don't understand what he's getting at there, but whatever. I don't see any chest hairs in any of it, so what's his point here? I don't get it. Oh, apparently the dude had a baby recently. Congratulations to him. Never heard of this one before, but okay. Okay, I guess he likes to show his chest hairs on occasion, and that's what Greg Locke zeroed in on. The guy seems to, we watched a couple of sermons from him, and I didn't see any chest hairs. It's weird that Locke picked up on the chest hair thing. Is Locke like the only person that even noticed the chest hairs? That makes me worry a little bit about what Locke is hiding from the rest of the world. Either he's jealous of the guy, or he's jealous of the guy's wife. One or the other. Okay, let's keep listening to Locke.
He's one of these cute guys on
He even called him cute. He's definitely jealous of the guy's wife. It's definitely his wife.
Twitter. Likes to show all of his chest hair while he's preaching. Didn't say a word. Big old church. Not a word. Creflo Dollar, crook.
Oh, I love it. Creflo Dollar is famous for being one of the first televangelists to blatantly, obviously scam his church members out of every penny they own just so he could buy a private jet. I mean, Kenneth Copeland is famous for doing that. Creflo Dollar did it first. He's terrible. And as a matter of fact, I think I have a video of Creflo Dollar, like a clip. No, maybe I don't. No, I guess I don't have a clip of Creflo Dollar on here. But anyway, yeah, he's terrible. He's absolutely terrible.
He's a crook even if he says something about abortion. Joyce Meyer. You'd think the biggest voice in women's ministry on the planet would say something about Roe v. Wade being overturned. And unless she surprises me today, she ain't said jack sprat. Chris Hodges. Largest church by far in Alabama. Not one word. Perry.
Not yet. Seriously, not one word yet. You haven't given them the time. Not even a week has passed. Some of them may have not even had their sermons yet. You know, it seems to me that Greg Locke just wants to cause drama. He wants to call people out and upset them and look like he's a fighter and he's tough and blah, blah, blah. This is all BS.
Not one word. Perry Stone.
Perry Stone's absolutely terrible. Absolutely awful. Perry Stone is a terrible person. And boy, do I have some clips of that guy.
He's got his own problems right now.
He probably says that because Perry Stone is under investigation for sexual assault or sexual battery or something. I don't even know what it is now. Yeah, he's terrible. Absolutely terrible in every way.
Bill Cornelius.
Don't
One
know
of the
him.
largest churches in Texas. Not a word. Lecrae. Ain't said a peep. Now, he supports Reverend Warnock, who's a pro-choice pastor. There ain't no such thing this side of hell, I'll tell you that right now.
When he says Warnock, I assume what he means is Raphael Warnock, which is one of the Georgia senators. He's a senator in Georgia, and he's running against Herschel Walker. Jack Sprat must be one of his favorite sayings. Yeah, it is. Yeah, he says it a lot. Jack Sprat is one of his favorite sayings. I don't know why. He could say Jack Squat, and it would work just as well, but whatever. Warnock is not pro-abortion. He's actually pro-life. Biden is pro-life. But they don't believe that they can impose their religious beliefs on other people. That's the difference. Warnock does not intend to get an abortion. Biden does not intend to get an abortion. But he realizes, they both do, that you can't force your beliefs and ideals on others. There are Jewish people out here who are religiously obligated to get an abortion in certain circumstances. Like, they believe that the Bible or their holy book or whatever tells them that they are required to get an abortion in some cases. And you are trampling on their religious rights by forcing them to follow yours. Doesn't connect in his head because he doesn't recognize what privilege is. He has no idea what it even is. He's so unfamiliar with persecution, he doesn't know what it's like to live without privilege.
I got a few more on the list.
Why even call these people out? They haven't had an opportunity yet. He's just doing it because he likes to start shit. That's it. That's why he's doing this.
I'm going to leave him alone. Now, look, let me tell you something. This is not one way or the other an endorsement or even a slam on some of them. Some of them I wouldn't spit on if they caught fire. I'm just saying, this is the biggest moment in American history in 50 years.
Maybe they haven't gotten around to talking about it yet. Why would they talk about it anyways? They have other things going on, and it was a success in their eyes. Why do they even need to mention it? Who cares?
And the largest platforms on the planet have not said a peep. Not said a peep.
Just nonsense, dude.
The biggest singing celebrities on the planet haven't said a peep. Say something about George Floyd. And they all got an opinion.
Well, yeah, that's because George Floyd was murdered, obviously. And aside from that, it was overturned. Like, his logic is not connecting. Even if I'm looking at it from his viewpoint, it doesn't make any sense. Does he believe that George Floyd was not murdered? Is he in favor of Derek Chauvin? What? I just don't understand, man.
Say something about Juneteenth, they all got an opinion. Right?
You say something about Juneteenth, they've all got an opinion. Well, yeah, that was the day that the slaves were freed. Of course they do. Aren't you in favor of freeing slaves? I don't understand.
Say something about, well, don't be too rough on the gender dysphoria drag queen story hour, and they've all got an opinion. But talk about abortion being abolished after 50 years, and not a peep comes out of their mouth.
Because it was abolished. They're not trying to accomplish anything. Just because they're not gloating about an accomplishment means that they don't want that accomplishment to take place? It's already done. Like, this guy lives in an alternate reality. No. Actually, that's not... Well, it is the case, but that's not the case with this specific situation. You know what's happening here? This guy is looking for a reason to call these people out. Anything he can find. He just likes starting drama. That's it. That's why he's doing this. Just to start drama.
Not a peep. I had to hurt my family's feelings the other day. I told them, I said, look, I love some of this music. Maverick City music, bunch of compromisers. That's all they are. Kirk Franklin's a sodomite. He's a sodomite.
Is that true? I don't know who that person is. I have no idea. Unfortunately, right now, the U.S. Supreme Court is looking into overturning privacy protections, which would allow the state to prosecute people who engage in quote-unquote sodomy, which means being gay is now illegal. But not just that. Anything that's not missionary position, basically, is illegal moving forward in Texas. As soon as the Supreme Court re-evaluates the case of Lawrence v. Texas, it is legal to prosecute anybody who engages in anything other than missionary.
Y'all can leave anytime you want to. He's a sodomite. I'm sick of these people not standing up for what's right and the church thinking they're the greatest things in the world when half this crowd on this list gonna bust hell wide open when they die. And then YouTube wants to have a meltdown when I get up and throw witches out of the church.
That's because you're very obviously a nutcase.
When I get up and say you can't be a Christian and a Democrat, which you can't, and that's been weeks ago since I said that. Everybody wants to have a meltdown. Oh my goodness, our pastor's so mean. No, you're just used to following people that won't say what needs to be said when it needs to be said and how it needs to be said. And I'm going to say it no matter whose hide it chaps. I don't care how mad I make any of you.
Did you ever consider the possibility, Greg, that maybe people aren't afraid to face the hard problems, or they're not afraid to say the tough things that need to be said? Maybe they just disagree with you. Maybe you're just an extremist and everybody in the world recognizes that and they want nothing to do with you. That ever cross the old cashew?
I'm not playing these games with these people. They can fly their inclusive rainbow flags outside their church doors if they want to. I'm not having it. Now, I just thought I'd get it all out on this one big celebration lap of a victory day. Amen? Just thought I'd get it all out. There's more of them, but we're going to deal with it. Let's go somewhere for a minute. I want you to go to Psalm 139, would you? Psalm 139. We got to do.
This is, as aforementioned, somebody in the chat earlier pointed out that Psalm 139 is commonly what's used to justify being pro-life. It's weak. It's a weak defense. It's not even, like, we'll get there. There are way, way more verses in the Bible that stand for being pro-choice rather than pro-life. But he's going to ignore all of those in favor of this one verse that kind of maybe implies that God is pro-life. Let's listen.
A little crash course learning here. Psalm 139. You see, I didn't write a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That's funny. That's, wait a minute. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Isn't that book by, that book's by a total scumbag, isn't it? Oh, shoot. Who's that book by? I forget. I've read it before. Or parts of it. I don't think I've read the whole thing. It's been a while, but anyway. It's basically a book on how to manipulate people. And, some of the stuff in there is psychologically sound, but why would you want to do that? That's absolutely terrible. So, anyway, it's an amoral book. I would not suggest people read it or follow its advice because it's kind of crooked. There are ways to positively influence people, and there are books that'll teach you how to do that, and that's how I do things. Like, for example, A Manual for Creating Atheists, using street epistemology to positively influence people, basically get them to think logically. That's not what the book Winning Friends and Influencing People is about. That book is all about manipulating people, controlling people to get what you want out of them, basically. Funny that he mentioned it.
You see, I didn't write a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And look, I know I'm going to go down in history as the most colossal jerk with a microphone. I get it.
It's weird that he even mentioned that book. Has he read it? That's a really, niche reference. I'm honestly surprised that he's even heard of it. Usually people who know what that book is are looking for ways to manipulate people. Or they're involved in psychology in some way. That's how I know about it. Actually, I know about that book because one of the YouTubers that I work with used that book to try to... Yeah, they used that book. So, anyway, you're a little bit of, just a tiny little bit of a scumbag if you use that book. I'm not telling you who it was. But anyway, it's kind of strange. They suggested that book to me. They were like, you should read this book. And I was like, what is this? So I read about it a little bit, looked into it, read the reviews, and discovered how crooked and fucked up that book is. It's kind of weird that Greg Locke knows what that book is.
I know I am. I don't mean to be.
Let me step back, get the last sentence there.
139. You see, I didn't write a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And look, I know I'm going to go down in history as the most colossal jerk with a microphone. I get it. I know I am. I don't mean to be. That's just the way that people perceive me.
I'm not an asshole. It's just the way that people perceive me. Wow. That's one way to defend yourself from being an asshole. You could try not being an asshole. That would probably help.
Right? It's the way YouTube perceives me, Facebook, family, friends that are no longer friends of our family. It's just...
What I've been told about Greg Locke is he's a really kind, nice guy. And he doesn't believe in confrontation. He doesn't believe in violence in everyday life. But when he gets up there on the pulpit, the shit that he preaches is absolutely unhinged, disturbing, crazy stuff. That's who he is. He is a completely different person at the pulpit than he is any other time, basically, in his everyday life. So take that for what you will. I think that he believes himself to be a good person, a nice person, because he is in real life, but he has horrific, disturbing views, and he spreads those views to millions of people. So
it's the way people are. But I'm going to tell you what I will never hear, I pray.
It's weird to me, the personality that I portray on YouTube is just me. This is just who I am. I don't, like, pretend to be somebody else. I don't lose my mind on people for no reason or whatever else. Like, this is just me. I don't get how somebody would put on a public face that's completely different from their private face. It's just strange to me. I don't understand how they can go about doing that. But Greg Locke obviously does. I mean, from the accounts that I've heard from other people in his life, like the witches that he called out, he's actually a very kind, nice person. Really, like a very nice, calm, caring, loving person. Greg Locke is, really. He really is, according to other people in his life. But he puts on a totally different personality on, at the pulpit. Why? Why does he do that? And how? Why doesn't he live the way he preaches? And vice versa. I just don't get why he does the things that he does. It's just weird.
I will never hear at the judgment seat of Christ, well, son, you could have told him if you would have, but you was a little bit too cowardly and compromised to do it. You see, that's what motivates me to say even things that make me and make you sweat. Make us nervous. Because you got to...
I'm thinking Greg Locke doesn't like person-to-person confrontation, but when he gets up on the pulpit, he's okay with the confrontation. It seems to me like he's afraid to confront people directly face-to-face, but when he gets up on the pulpit, he knows he's got security everywhere, and he doesn't have to face people down, and he can say whatever he wants. It's like his outlet. I would be willing to bet that's what it is.
Start realizing your heroes need to be a little bit more biblical than the ones you've chosen thus far. And I'm not looking to be anybody's hero. I got my own faults. Okay, I got my own warts. But at the end of the day, I really do try to live holy and try to live right, and that's why I can say these things, because they're not going to get no bunch of dirt on me. You can have that. I'm going to preach it gun barrel straight. And I'm over the church in America being seduced by spirits and doctrines of demons, and everybody in the church being seduced by them because they got a big platform. Bigness does not mean better. Bigness.
You know who says things like that? Bigger does not mean better. People who are really tiny. And as a matter of fact, Greg Locke is actually very tiny. From my understanding, the dude is like 5'4" or something, which is like, that's pretty small. I mean, that's neither here nor there.
Does not mean the power of God. You don't believe me? Look at the Mormon church. They're real big and corrupt to the core. Islam is the fastest growing religion on the planet.
I don't know that that's true. They are one of the biggest religions on the planet, but I don't know if it's one of the fastest growing. I don't trust that stat.
Bigness does not mean betterness. Does that make sense?
Not really, no, because that was completely improper grammar, but you know what? I'll let that slide, I suppose.
Psalm 139. Look at verse 14. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Some people more fearful than others, but amen. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance, watch this, was not hid from thee when I, watch this, was made in secret. You ever notice that? He said, my mom and dad got together, made me in secret. But God knew all about you, for they made you in secret. God knew who you were, as we'll see in Jeremiah chapter 1 in just a moment, before you were ever a twinkle in your daddy's eye on honeymoon night. God knew everything about you.
I assume that they believe this because God is all-knowing, knows everything, past and future. There's nothing that God doesn't know about everything all at once, right? That doesn't mean that, like, you were a full-blown human being as soon as you were conceived. That's a completely different meaning. Like, that's not what the Bible was saying, and that's not what the people in the Bible believed. That's not what God led them to believe. And by implying that that is what the Bible was saying, like he's doing here, you are misleading people and misinterpreting the Bible intentionally.
He said, my substance was in me when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy book, I love this, all my members were written. God knows every finger, every toe, head and shoulders, knees and toes, and that you see.
Okay, why is he singing children's songs now? Please don't do that, Locke.
Our kids, he knows it all. He knows every hair on your head, which in continuance were fashioned, watch this, when as yet there was none of them. God knew what I was going to look like before my parents knew what I was going to look like. He knew the characteristics and attributes of my heart, my features, every hair on my head, or the lack thereof. Some of you bald men say amen. He knew it all before you were ever even made in secret. I want you to go to Jeremiah chapter 1 for just a moment.
Yeah, so that's the verse that a lot of people use to justify being pro-life, conveniently ignoring the fact that it has nothing to do with babies being born. It has nothing to do with abortion or any of that stuff, and ignoring the verses that are actually about abortion. You know, the verses that specifically say the Bible endorses abortion. If the priest gives you bitter water and the baby was not your husband's, then it will force a miscarriage. There's a whole verse, or there's a whole section of verses about that. The Bible is explicitly and specifically pro-abortion. Not pro-choice, but pro-abortion. And that is why the Jewish people have a religious obligation to get abortions in some circumstances, and why Christians are trampling all over other people's religious rights by taking that choice away. There's actually something with OCD called, I think it's called intrusive thoughts. This is the dead giveaway that you have OCD. If you don't know, if you're not sure if you have OCD or not, this is the dead giveaway. If you have OCD, you'll have these thoughts of like, you know, what if I'm on the interstate, I'm in a car driving, and if I just jerk the wheel, or you're on the edge of like the Grand Canyon, you're on a cliff or something, and you're like, what if I just jump? Or you're sitting next to somebody, you're like, what if I just push them off the edge of the cliff, you know? Intrusive thoughts. Usually it revolves around fears of harming people, but they're actually, people with OCD are actually significantly less likely to do those things than others, like the general population, because they are truly disturbed by the idea of doing any of this stuff. They don't want to do any of this. It's just intrusive ideas that don't, you know, they're not at risk of it. So they take precautions to make sure that they don't do this stuff because they don't know why these thoughts are coming to them unbidden, basically. Kind of interesting. It's not just doing things that could potentially kill you. It's also like doing things to hurt others. Like I could, talking to somebody, you could say, I could just punch this person in the face right now. What would this person do? Usually my intrusive thoughts, being OCD as I am, revolve around acting out the worst case scenario in any situation. Like a while back, my grandpa died. A few months ago, he died. And the intrusive thought that I had, I bought these books, like these picture books, like 30-page picture books, and I found a bunch of pictures of my grandpa and everybody in the family. And I included them, you know, each picture in the picture book. And I bought like 10 of these books, and I gave them out to each of my aunts and uncles. Just because it was a nice thing to do, you know. And the intrusive thought that I had as I was giving them the books was, what if I told them I want $50 per book? You know, I would never do that. It wasn't for money. I didn't want money out of it. It wasn't about that at all. But that was like worst case scenario. They would suddenly, the entire family would look at me like a scumbag because I was obviously just doing this for money. Where in reality, I didn't want money. I didn't ask for money. It wasn't about that at all. I had plenty of money in my bank account. I'm very jealous about how good you are at this game. Like, extremely jealous. I wish I was that good. I appreciate that. Just lots of practice, I guess. I am very good at this game. Not to toot my own horn or anything. Toot, toot, baby. Toot, toot.
I'll hear pages turning, but for time's sake, I got to move. We got a bit of a journey left. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4. Then the word of the Lord. Notice this wasn't the word of a pastor. This wasn't the word of a denominational hierarchy. This wasn't the word of some seminary professor. This was the word of God. If you disobey me, big deal. You disobey God, you're in a mess. This was the word of God. Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, before I formed, say formed, not just created. We were created in God's image for God's glory. Genesis 2:6, and the Lord God formed a man out of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. But he uses the word formed. It means intricately, detailed. He knows every part and parcel of who I am this morning. Before I formed thee in the belly, right? Before you were there in your mama's belly, I knew thee. Only God can say that.
Yeah, but this verse that he's reading from here, this was specifically about a prophet, not about the general population. This verse is very obviously not about being pro-life or pro-abortion or whatever else. Again, I mean, I've said this, if I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times. The Bible is pro-abortion, not pro-choice, but pro-abortion. It's not neutral on the subject. It says you should have abortions in some circumstances. But they pick out one misinterpreted verse that's talking about a single person, not about people in general, or not even about abortion. And they run with it. They say that this is the verse that they use to justify to justify being pro-life. It's ridiculous.
God knows about life before life begins, and the Bible is plain that life begins at the moment of conception.
No, that's not what the verse was saying at all. It wasn't about that in any way. Completely misinterpreting what that verse was about. Did he even read the context around it? I deeply doubt it.
Life begins. The second of conception is when life begins, according to God. Before I formed you in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, he said, man, before you came out, I sanctified. That word means to be set apart for God's purpose. And I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Now think about that for just a moment. He said, look, before you were ever even born, son, before you were ever thought of, before anyone even knew your name, I had your number. And when I read things like this, it makes all those trips to abortion clinics, standing outside preaching the gospel.
Oh God, was Greg Locke one of those people that stood outside of clinics preaching the Bible? Why would he? What verse was he reading from the Bible that was against abortion?
All those trips to D.C. and the trip in 2017, my first time going to Washington, D.C. to fight Planned Parenthood for the first time ever after they sent 6,000 donation letters in my name, 6,000 donations to Planned Parenthood in the name of Pastor Greg Locke.
Oh, I love it. Did somebody do that? I didn't hear about that. That's funny.
We kept all 6,000 letters. I stuck them in a great big suitcase. Flew them with me all the way to Washington, D.C. Drug them suckers down a long, lonely sidewalk. The security guards at Planned Parenthood had watched the video and knew I was there. They had the swords drawn, wouldn't let me in the door. We got on a live stream. Some of you saw it. I opened up a suitcase and poured out over 6,000 letters on the doorstep of Planned Parenthood and said, I'm going to defy you. I'm going to stand against you. We stand for life. We stand for liberty. We stand for children. We stand for the value and the sanctity of what God has created. And
Boy, he must have been really upset by this. I didn't hear about this. Apparently, pro-choice people donated, I guess 6,000 pro-choice people donated money to Planned Parenthood in Greg Locke's name. That's funny. That's really funny. And he's super upset by this. I love it. Greg, let me give you a little word of advice as somebody who's a public figure or whatever. Don't ever tell people your weaknesses. Don't tell anybody what really bothers you because they will use it against you. Just a friendly word of advice, bud.
I poured him on the doorstep and walked away. And when I walked away, I accidentally stepped in some bushes. And one of them death workers walked out and said, "Oh my goodness, can't you respect the bushes?" I said, "If you respected them babies as much as you respect them stupid bushes, I wouldn't be here from Nashville making..."
Oh, so he's saying he vandalized stuff. That's what he's saying right now. He vandalized their property.
My goodness.
Let me just step back and write this down.
And the sanctity of what God has created, and I poured them on the doorstep and walked away.
Yeah, okay, so 120/20 roughly. Well, I gotta write this one down. All that time spent complaining about Black Lives Matter, vandalizing this and that, and blah, 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 and they're the ones burning buildings down, and all that stuff that he said earlier. All that time spent talking about how evil they are for vandalizing this and that. And he stands here on stage describing a time when he vandalized a Planned Parenthood, and he's proud of it. The reason that he has this cognitive dissonance, the reason he's capable of holding these two beliefs simultaneously is because he's an extremist. It's not okay when they do it. It is okay when I do it because I'm right and they're wrong. How about this? Vandalism is wrong, period. How about this? Violence is wrong. No violence. I am a deep pacifist. Not everybody believes, or no, not everybody agrees with me on this point, but I am. I am a pacifist to the core.
Created, and I poured them on the doorstep and walked away.
And then?
And when I walked away, I accidentally stepped in some bushes.
Accidentally, right.
All these Christians these days want to save the world and kill babies. You can save the planet all you want to. God's going to burn it up if you read the Bible. You can free willy all you want to. God's going to turn the nations and the waters to blood. Save them all you want to. I don't care how much recycling you do. I ain't worshiping nature. I'm worshiping the God of nature, ladies and gentlemen. And I value life over planets and dirt and nonsense.
You can free willy all you want to? My only experience, I have two experiences with that phrase, free willy. The first experience is the movie, Free Willy. That old, I don't know when it came out, the 90s maybe. It's about that whale that they were trying to save or whatever. And my second one is with people flashing other people. So which one do you think he's talking about here? Probably the whale one, but I like to think he's talking about flashing people.